So here's a summary of what's happening in the Parsha on the literal level. The Parsha begins with the last 3 of the 10 plagues. A swarm of locusts devours all the crops and greenery. A thick darkness envelops the land, and on the 15th of the month of Nisan, at midnight, all the firstborn of Egypt die. The first mitzvah is then given to the children of Israel to establish a calendar based on the monthly rebirth of the moon. The Israelites are also instructed to bring a Passover offering. A lamb or a goat is to be slaughtered, and its blood sprinkled on the doorposts and lintel of every Israelite home, so that God should pass over, and that's Passover, Pesach, pass over those homes when the plague of the firstborn takes place. The roasted meat of the offering is to be eaten that night together with the matzah and bitter herbs. And by the way, this is this first mitzvah of establishing the calendar is the basis for the way the Jewish calendar works, which is that is a lunar calendar, but the extra month of Adar is added on some years in order to make sure that all the holidays stay in the same season, because it also says in the Torah that Pesach should happen in the month of Aviv, in the month of spring, and so that's the whole basis of why we have our calendar in that way. The death of the firstborn finally breaks Pharaoh's resistance, and he drives the children of Israel out from his land. So hastily do they depart that there is no time for the dough to rise, hence the practice of eating matzah in commemoration of the Exodus. Before they go, they ask their Egyptian neighbors for gold, silver, and garments, fulfilling the promise made to Abraham that his descendants would leave Egypt with great wealth. The children of Israel are instructed to consecrate all firstborn and to observe the anniversary of the Exodus each year by removing all leaven from their possession. That's the chametz, or chametz, for 7 days, eating matzah and telling the story of the redemption to their children. They're also instructed to wear tefillin on the arm and head as a reminder of the Exodus and their commitment to the divine as the power of liberation. Here's our Torah of Awakening. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe. Hashem said to Moses, Bo, come, al Paro, come to Pharaoh, ki ani hichbadti et libo ve'et lev avadav. I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his servants, lema'an shiti ototai ele bikirbo, so that I may place my signs within him. A little story. Reb Yoel of Chopli, a Hasid of Reb Mordechai of Lechovich, was beset with a deep angst and dissatisfaction with life. So he set out to seek wisdom from his master. When he arrived, he was so eager that he pounded loudly on the door and shouted, "Open up, please." Reb Asher, who was another student who had stepped outside for some fresh air, heard the noise and exclaimed, "Who is that pounding?" "It is I," said Reb Yoel. The voice of the master came booming from within. "Where in the whole universe can you find a creature that can say I about itself? For the true I says, Va'avarti ve'eretz Mitzrayim, I will go through or cross through the land of Egypt. Ani Adonai, I am the divine." And about this verse, the Haggadah says, the Haggadah is the little book we read on Passover, Ani hu velo acher, I am that, and there is no other. When Reb Yoel heard these words through the door, he no longer needed anything. He had received the wisdom he sought. He untied his pony and trotted home to Chopli, his thirst quenched. Okay. So what's going on here? Reb Yoel's existential angst is cured when his master leads him from his own separate self-sense of I, or ego. That's what we usually mean when we say I. We mean when we say the word I, we mean me as an individual entity among other entities situated here in the world. That's the general thing that we mean when we say I. But he takes him from that place and he leads him to the inner identity of all existence, what we might call the big I. This realization is also expressed in the Aleinu prayer. Hu Eloheinu ein od. It is our divinity. Ein od, there is nothing else. Meaning our divinity, i.e. our awareness, is not separate from existence itself. There is nothing but existence, and we are not separate from that. But later on it says, V'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. The divine will be king over all the earth. As if there's a dualism, as if there is the divine on one hand and the earth on the other, and they're two separate things. But this is resolved in the second half of the verse, Bayom hahu yihyeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. And on that day the divine will be one, and its name will be one. U'shemo echad, the name will be one. So what is meant by this? What's so important about the name? The name is a pointer to our conceptual understanding of God. Names are the basic way our mind gets a grip on things. So existence itself can only ever be one. How could there be more than one everything? Right? You can't have more than one everything. But the structure of thought is based on seeing things as separate. The duality then is not between God and the world, but between God, which includes the world, and our mental concept of God. The goal that the divine will be one and its name will be one means that we must learn to go beyond the structure of thought and know the oneness directly. That is the fruit of meditation. In meditation, we do not turn away from, deny, or ignore our separate self-sense. Rather, we become present with it. Bo el Paro. Come to Pharaoh. Not go, but come, as if God is there with Pharaoh calling Moses to come. Pharaoh represents the separate self-sense, or ego, created when consciousness identifies with thought and feeling. Okay, so Pharaoh is a stand-in or a pointer to ego. That is separate self-sense identity. That's the enslaver. Moses represents the liberating activity of consciousness. So Moses coming to Pharaoh, then, is the practice of bringing our awareness into ourselves, into the feeling of being a separate entity. Rather than just being a separate entity, we feel the feeling of being a separate entity. When we do this, when we shift from feeling that we are the separate entity into perceiving the feeling of being an entity, then we can shift into knowing ourselves as the open space of awareness within which we experience the ego. It's not really an ego anymore then, because we're not really taking for granted that we are the separate entity, rather we are perceiving it. And so what are we then? If we're perceiving that ego sense, then we are no longer that ego sense. We are the perceiver of it. And that is being consciousness. That's the shift in identity, which is also called spiritual awakening. From here, it's a small step to recognize this awareness that I am is not mine. It is reality waking up as this body-mind. It is God seeing through these eyes. And that is the liberation pointed to by the Exodus story. They cried out, and their cries from their slavery rose up to God. Ordinarily, we are enslaved by our separate self-sense, though we are not likely to notice this until we encounter suffering. But when suffering does arise, then there is a special opportunity to cry out in prayer. That crying out is the beginning of liberation. It is the motivation we need for doing the ongoing work of presence. It's very rare and very unlikely that a person will put forth the inner work in presence, the inner work necessary for spiritual awakening, unless they're motivated by pain. In this week of Shabbat Bo, may we practice ever more deeply, making the connection between consciousness and the fullness of reality as it meets us in this moment, communing with the presence that shines silently from all things. And this is represented by the Sphira of Malchut, that is presence with the presence.